Good morning, students. It's 6th of April, and today we are going to continue our lesson number 2, chapter number 10. I want you all to open your books, page number 460. On page number 460, we have the topic, how can you separate the parts of a mixture? Means if you have a mixture and you want to separate the ingredients of the mixture, the parts of a mixture you want to separate, how can you do that? We can use physical properties to separate a mixture. For example, you can separate a mixture of beads and coins by picking up different shapes and colors. You can also use properties like volume, size, state, and density. If you have any mixture and you want to separate the ingredients of the mixture, you can separate them on the basis of the physical properties. For example, if you have a mixture of beads and coins and you want to separate them, so you can separate them on the basis of the shapes, you can separate them on the basis of colors. Okay, so one type of shape at one side and the other types of shape on the other side, you can separate on the basis of their shapes, and you can separate on the basis of the colors also. The other properties which you can use to separate the parts of a mixture are, you can separate on the basis of volume, you can separate on the basis of size, on the basis of state, and on the basis of their densities. Okay, so all these are shapes, colors, volume, size, state, density, all these are physical properties. Now the other one, settling. You can separate the ingredients of the mixture on the basis of settling. Now what's that? One way to separate the parts of a mixture is by settling. What is settling? Settling is when differences in densities cause the parts of a mixture to separate. Now, what is settling? Settling is done on the basis of the densities of the parts of the mixture. The part of the mixture who has more density will sink down, will sink at the bottom, and the objects whose densities are less, their densities will float. They are at the above. So, on the basis of this, we can separate them. For instance, mud is a mixture of sediment and water. Sediment, the small pieces, the tiny pieces of rocks. So, what is mud? Mud is a mixture of sediment and water. Over time, the sediment in over time the sediment in mud will sink at the bottom. The sediment settles because it is denser than water. Now, what happens that if there is a mixture, if there is some mud, now mud is a mixture of sediment and water. Now, over time, what happens? The sediments in the mud, they, their densities are more than the density. Their densities are more. Their density is more than the density of water. So the sediments will sink to the bottom, and the density of so the densities of the sediment will so the sediments will sink at the bottom. Why? Because their density is more than the density of water. So this is called settling. The sediments settle because it is denser than water. The density of the sediments, it's more than the density of water, so they sink at the bottom. So we can collect the sediments, and in this way we can separate. Now the other one here on page number 461, we have something more. That is filtration. Now, what is filtration? A filter separates things by size. Now, if you want to separate on the basis of the sizes of the objects, we can use the method filtration. We can filter them. Usually, the filter is a mesh, screen, net, or sieve. So here I have the pictures. This is the picture of the net. This is what net is. This is mesh, and this is sieve. Okay, so you can use all these things to filter any object. Materials that are smaller then the holes in a filter can pass through it. The materials whose size is less than the holes in the filter, they can pass through the net, they can pass through the filter, and the larger materials stay behind. So in this way, you separate the larger materials at one, you separate the larger material and the smaller material. You separate on the basis of their sizes. Have you ever cooked noodles? You probably use a colander to drain the water out. Now, see the picture above. Here, a colander filters noodles from water. Here is a colander and it is filtering water and the noodles. Have you ever cooked noodles? You probably use a colander to drain the water out. People often use filters to separate a solid from a liquid. This process is called filtration. Now, what is filtration? Like if you have any mixture of liquid and solid, if you have any mixture of liquid and solid, you can separate them by using the process filtration. What you do, people often use filters to separate a solid and a from a liquid. People use filters. They use filters to separate the liquid and the solid. The liquid will pass through the filter, it will be collected separately, and the solid will remain on the filter. So in this way, liquid and solid, they can be separated. This process is called filtration. Now the other one, to separate the parts of the mixture, we have magnets. You can also use a magnet to separate the parts of some mixtures. Okay, magnets are often used to separate scrap metal in junkyards. Now, with the help of magnets, we can separate the metals because the metals will be attracted by the magnets. So we can separate the metals. A magnet pulls or attracts the elements like iron, nickel, and cobalt. The iron will attract or it will pull the elements like iron, nickel, and cobalt. This property is called magnetic attraction. All those elements which are attracted by magnet, the magnet will attract them and we can separate them easily. So now I stop the topic here from page number 4.